So reminding ourselves of the respect ground rule and the process. Speakers will be, I will be calling you from the sign-in sheet. Those who are providing written comments as well as oral comments will be called up first, and then those who want to make oral comments will be called. I'll call you by name, and what I'll do is call the first one up and the one behind who's next, so the one behind knows, and then as the next one comes up, I'll tell who's next, so you know who's coming up when. These are comments to be provided to the advisory board. If you have written comments in addition, they will also be to BLM. So with that, I know 4-minute rule is, we have about 41 presenters, so a lot of you have a lot to share. And dividing that by the minutes available, we have 4 minutes for each of you. And I will be tracking it on my cell phone and give you a 1-minute warning when you're at 3 minutes, so you know have 1 more minute to go. And then I'm afraid I really will need you to close out if you get to your 4 minutes, because it's only to be fair to have everybody else have the opportunity to speak. We don't have an unlimited amount of time available this morning.
Anna?
Yes.
Does the 4 minutes account for the 15-minute break?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're already 5 minutes late,
Good.
so so if you're less than 4 minutes, that's just fine, because we'll need the time. Okay. So, first up, and I apologize if I'm not able to pronounce all of your names, Bonnie Kaluter from Alamo. And behind her will be Deborah Beckman, so Deborah can get ready. I'm sorry, you'll be speaking right there.
Is this where you want me? Is this where you want me?
Can you close the door in the back? Thank you.
Okay, I plan to read most of my report and then to comment as I go along a little bit. Here, so I'm saying here that the BLM, in my opinion, needs to develop an accurate accounting method of the horses and the burros left on the range. And I was glad to hear yesterday that this is a part of the NAS study, and I think it should be a priority, because as it stands now, we're operating under a lot of guesstimates and a lot of different individuals reporting differently. 38,000 horses are not on the range. You have said it repeatedly this past year in documents at the summit. I did a study. I took it upon myself. I went home. I retired. I said, what to do with my life? So I went from HMA to HMA, and I talked with the wild horse and burro specialists, with the rangeland management specialists, with the state leads. I asked for their documents, their district documents, state documents, which they sent to me. I looked at the national statistics. I looked at a lot of data. And what I came up with, I just kept going on, down with numbers. What I came up with, more like 28,000 horses and burros are on the range. And I was listening to a man from Arizona yesterday, and his statistics sort of, they went along with my statistics. He was a little bit over on the horses. So given that we have the 28,000 today, if you take a 10% foaling, I don't buy into the 20% because of what we're doing now with the PCP, with a foaling rate 10%, with 7,500 horses removed for the next 2 years, you will in 2 years be at 18,000 horses. That will be left on the range 2 years from now, if you do the math. Add on to this your fertility control treatments, your sex ratioing, and the scattering of your banded horses, isolating and imperiling these horses' survival. That will likely reduce the 18,000 even more. I found, when I counted up, about 144 HMAs with just horses. I didn't take into account the burros. And with that number, of the 144, I counted that 45 or 31% of the herds had less than 50 horses. 95 or 66% had 150 or less, and only 49 or 34% at 150 or over. And I then understood from what I read and from what actually the district people sent to me that in the field of PhDs in the field of immunology and reproduction, maintain 150 or more horses should be in a herd to avoid inbreeding, anomalies, a threat to continued existence. And if this is true, you only have 49 herds in 10 western states in this position today. 1 minute, okay. Now, not only did I find of concern the numbers, but I also found of concern the way that people reported to me. There were a lot of guesstimates. I think that in some areas, like in Arizona, I talked to 4 different people, and 4 different people had 4 different answers about the Surbat Mountains. One said there's only 10 there. One said there's 60 there. 30 seconds. Okay, so 30 seconds. Last thing I'm going to say here is, you know, the Chinese and the Russians got together recently because there's only 20,000 tigers left. And they said, what are we going to do here? So I'm saying we have a challenge here for us, too. What are we going to do with our low numbers, even though I know that there's all these competing interests on the range? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. After Deborah will be Kathy Mahan. Woo. That was your timer. Okay.
Transparency, transparency, transparency. I think transparency is the key. The BLM needs to open their kimono and permit full transparency and disclosure of all aspects of their organization and its activities to the public. Failure to do so is fueling public distrust and is resulting in the BLM needing to focus valuable energy to defend what appears to be clandestine activity. If there is nothing to hide, then this should not be difficult to address and implement. Accountability. The public should be allowed to view and document the gathering activities. All members of a BLM crew should have numbers on their backs to identify them from afar, much like the kind of numbers that are on the back of a race contestant, to identify them. Doing so will help ensure that everyone is on their best behavior. When people know they are being watched and when there are consequences to their actions, people will perform accordingly. When there is a problem detected, then the problem can be easily addressed. The helicopter should have dash cams like police cars do. As a former police officer, I can attest to the value of dash cams. It protects the officer against false accusations, and it protects the public against police misconduct, and it provides an excellent tool for reviewing processes and procedures and for looking to see how things can be improved. Similar results can be achieved by installing the helicopter cams. All gathers should be actively video documented by more than one member of the BLM. The video should be used by the BLM to review and improve their processes and procedures. That video documentation also needs to be made available to the public for review. Stationary video cameras should be used in pens to ensure the safety of the horses and people and to ensure procedures are followed properly and to provide a method of identifying areas needing improvement. The public should be allowed to observe the entire gather activity from a safe distance. They should not be excluded from viewing, photographing, or videotaping a gather. Continuous improvement. The BLM needs to adopt a mentality of continuous improvement by developing and implementing methods that allow them the ability and agility that is required to course correct. Failure to do so results in the BLM continuing to be bogged down with defending their actions. The BLM needs to adopt best-known methods to collect and review their best-known methods to collect data and review their processes, procedures, and methods to report their progress towards continuous improvement to themselves, to the advisory board, and to the public. All professional sports organizations, the NFL, NBA, NLB, etc., collect statistics and video of their performance in the field. They review the data to help determine their strategy, both offense and defense. The public is privy to all that information. The BLM should adopt similar methods in order to help guide their strategy and to move their organization towards excellence.
1 minute.
And lastly, slaughter and abuse. It should be a federal offense to send a Mustang or burro to slaughter. It should be a federal offense to abuse a Mustang or burro. All Mustangs or burros should be microchipped upon coming in contact with the BLM. All horses and burros at the border and at slaughterhouses should be scanned, and they should be, and those organizations should be charged with a federal offense for trafficking federally protected animals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
After Kathy Mahan, we'll have Tom Allen.
It was really hard to condense this because it's a growing list. I feel that anyone who accepts a government contract that involves the care and safety of living creatures should not have the right to deny us access. That if they don't want to be watched or photographed and held accountable for their actions, they should not have taken a job working for public dollars. I take exception to the statement that a contractor staff is properly trained in wild horse handling. In the videos I've watched, the contract staff, there's no release, no reward for the right decision. There's usually 3 or more people waving flags from different sides. It's really confusing for the horses who don't even really know what the rules are yet. The contractor should not be paid by the head, dead or alive. They should be docked for lame, injured, and dead horses. Performance-paid incentives work best if there are a quality of work element involved. And also, gather-related deaths need to include any deaths that result from that horse being removed from the range. That includes processing, found dead, unbranded babies, aborted foals, and those that are euthanized because they were deemed flawed but managed to live in that condition on the range. I was shocked yesterday that there was going to be no research involved in the NAS study. That's what we need the most. We need to know what the current AML levels are. How many horses are out there, what HMAs. I was worried that there was going to be nothing left to study with the gathers that were going on last year. And then I find out there was really no plans to do any study at all. There should be arbitrators chosen, like a jury where each side gets to make nominations and vetoes, not just BLM picking people to write reports on BLM. If the BLM figures for reproduction are correct, there would be no need to remove older horses that have been, where they've been holding regular gathers. We see many older horses ripped from the only life they've known, and I think we need to look at those numbers. We need to get those numbers and see those numbers. In HMAs where they normally gather 800 to 900 horses recently, or in the past, they were telling us there were 750 left. They go back in 4 years and they do the same thing. 900 out, 750 are left. Now they've gone in and gathered 1,800 and tell us there's still 750 left. I don't believe it. And if you ask, there's nothing to support it, nothing credible. It's just because I say so. And that's like a parent who offers you that when they have no other reasonable explanation. In Twin Peaks, they were going to skew the sex ratios and release PZP mares back into the range. Instead of the promised number, they released 9 mares. 9. I asked, where are those mares? When would they be released? And I got no response.
1 minute, Renee.
When I was at Litchfield, I saw a pen that was marked and it was told those are horses to be released. The gather ended in September. It's March. Why are they still there? And finally, we heard Patty Colbert speak yesterday, and she rocked the house. That's what Patty does, and she'll do what it takes to make things happen. And I really needed her to tell me not to cry right now, and she didn't. She's contagious. Her crew is amazing, the volunteers, the trainers, and their families who keep returning. The friendliness and the competition is uplifting. Most of the trainers do not do it for the money. And if you do not fully fund the Mustang Heritage Foundation, you're making your next biggest mistake. They're your best and brightest asset. They're better than those expensive spin doctors you hired, and they made Mustangs as popular as Labradoodles. And they're, right now, the only one that's saving BLM money.
Time is up.
Thank you.
After Tom will be Elise Gardner.
Thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Tom Allen. I'm here representing the Public Lands Foundation, whose members have thousands of years of collective experience managing resources. No one in the foundation receives pay for foundation work. 12 years ago, we prepared a position statement regarding wild horses and burros, stating that substantial changes need to be made in how they are managed. Our belief then and in our position statement updated last year is that wild horses and burros should be managed on a limited number of federally designated ranges in the West. All wild horses and burros would eventually live on these ranges, exclusive of livestock, and all other herd management areas would be retired. Ranges would be managed for the benefit of wild horses and burros and wildlife. This position should not be confused with the Secretary's proposal to acquire land for preserves, which is altogether a quite different proposal. The act resulted in the creation of nearly 200 herd management areas scattered throughout 10 states involving 44 offices. After nearly 40 years of experience, it is clear that this happenstance patchwork of HMAs has contributed both to the high cost and the difficulty of managing the animals. With the benefit of hindsight, it is inconceivable that Congress would today create such a patchwork of areas in an effort to meet the purpose of the act. My purpose here today is not to ask you to endorse creation of ranges as we have suggested. However, it'd be okay if you chose to do that. Instead, I'm here asking this board to consider making a recommendation to the BLM that they cooperate with the foundation to provide information necessary to better develop the option of establishing federal ranges. We're not asking for funding or access to other than public information. Work would be done by volunteer resource professionals accessing information in BLM offices. We simply need BLM to point us to the information. The foundation has what it believes to be a good relationship with the BLM, but would benefit from your endorsement to facilitate our work. The foundation knows well that the devil is in the details of what we propose. Our interest is in developing the kind of information necessary for the creation of ranges to be fully considered, either now or in the future. If further work on our position suggests that the devils are too many and too difficult to overcome, we will be the first to tell everyone that. The foundation has made a preliminary review of the recently released strategy proposal and intends to provide detailed comments by the end of the month. At this time, we only offer our concern that management is at risk of going forward with only minor variations on the status quo, while substantive decisions and actions are deferred for 2 or more years.
1 minute.
Thank you, and copies of my remarks have been made available.
Thank you.
Next up is Elise, and after Elise is Scotty Poo. I hope I got that right, from Prescott.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I want to thank the BLM and Director Abby for responding positively in the negative in terms of abandoning the treasured herd concept, abandoning the waste of spending our money to buy private land when the government has 240 million acres of public land that the BLM manages. So I'm grateful, and I am wondering what happened to the commitment about working with the Forest Service to repatriate horses that are in long-term holding. We heard some things in Denver that I'm really hoping we'll hear more about, because I haven't heard anything about that yet. I wonder if you all could just hopefully hear yourselves when you're talking about removals. Renee just said, make sure that we remove blank so that there's sufficient forage on the range. Now, you can put any animal in there. We keep saying horses. Horses, there's a certain amount of forage on the range. It needs to be more fairly allocated for the wild horses in their herd management areas. We're not saying, thank you, we're not saying don't manage horses. What we're saying is there needs to be more priority given to them in their own puny 26 million acres that they have left. Carla mentioned natural horse training to start immediately And to start immediately, Pat Pirelli is having a taming of the Mustang. I don't quite care for the name, but he is having a workshop in Reno, July 31st, that weekend. So I hope that the contractors all and BLM wranglers can maybe make use of that immediately. I think, I wonder if you all know what a beating burros take, being rounded up. It disturbs me that the observer report didn't go, none of the observers went to a burro roundup. And by the way, that report, I think all of the people doing that report were, are pro-slaughter, but that aside, Sarah Ralston gets horses from BLM, is pro-roundup, has been recorded in papers speaking that, and she is not unbiased. And she has a vested interest in maintaining a good relationship with BLM because she does get horses for her program from them. So I don't think she is an independent, unbiased person. Dr. Cami Gillespie talks about horses having a social contract, and if they violate that social contract, then they can go to slaughter. So I wonder what social contract the Mustangs have or have violated because they're not out there on the range anymore for us to view. They've violated their social contract.
1 minute.
Finally, I want to focus on the family band. The family band has to be honored. BLM, do it right. I see nothing in the way you manage these horses that honors the integrity of who they are. The family structure is everything, and in one afternoon you destroy everything that the stallion has worked for all his life. Even in your trap treat release, Twin Peaks was a travesty. You abandoned the plan of releasing horses back into their HMAs as they went along. And the plan was to remove all, or round up all PZP treat and put back on the range. But you release the stallions, and then a day or two later you release the mares. Show us that you have some respect for these animals and their nature by beginning to handle them and respect them for the animals that they are and within their social structure. It's vital in many more ways than just because we like them. It will affect their reproductive rate. That's been demonstrated in studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Scotty Poo, and then after that, Simone Netherlands.
Hello, my name is Scotty Poo, and I'm with the Respect for Horses organization, and I live in Prescott, Arizona. I'm going to keep it really simple today. Basically, what's on our T-shirts is there's 12 points I'd like to say that's on our T-shirts, and I'll submit that for comment. With or without money, stop all roundups now. Give the horses and burros their original acres back. Number 3, increase the horse AMLs. Number 4, decrease the cattle AMLs. Number 5, fire Sungjae and the Coutures and use humane roundup methods. Number 6, start being transparent. Give us access to everything all the time. Number 7, start being accountable for every horse. Record data accurately and correctly. Number 8, leave untouched and undamaged herds. Number 9, start using acceptable scientific methods. Number 10, make the holding facilities more humane. Give them shelter. Number 11, stop acting like you're a part of pest control for ranchers and mining industries, and start acting like you're an agency in charge of preserving and protecting the last of our remaining wild horses and burros.
Thank you.
And number 12, stop disgracing America. Stop all the roundups now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna? Anna?
Thank you, Scotty.
Anna?
Yes.
Man. You need to.
Could we please hold the applause, because it's not appropriate for people to be able to, you're taking their time for their comments, so if you could please hold applause, let the people say their remarks, that would be appreciated by many. Next up is Simone, and then after that, Jennifer Gillespie.
Good morning, my name is Simone Netherlands. I'm the founder of Respect for Horses organization. When a drain in your sink is clogged and the water is flowing over, even a child knows that the first thing to do is to go turn off the faucet. The horses are harming no one and costing no one a dime on the public lands where they have a legal right to live. Just because you've been doing something the wrong way for a very long time does not make you experts. It just makes you very slow learners. You are our federal government. You are the government of the most influential country in the world. You should be held to higher standards. You are disgracing America. You should be the poster child for humane standards for the handling of our American icons, just in order to rule by example. There's no room for a learning curve. Hire people who already have the knowledge if you don't. Hire natural horsemanship people. You need to use actual science, actual monitoring of the herds on the range. You need to be accountable for every horse you gather. Not having an accurate data recording system or software for keeping track of every horse is completely unacceptable. We want to know where every horse is that ever came off the range. We want to know their age, their color. We want their accurate numbers to stay with them. When we ask you, where's this horse that I saw you round up, we want to know where it is, who it got sold to, who adopted that horse, what holding facility it is in now, long or short term. According to your own numbers, taken from your own website in 2007, and then you continue those numbers and add a 20% birth rate, which is an absolutely ludicrous rate. But taking that, just to humor you, and you continue that on to today, in September of 2012, the number of horses left in the wild will be 5,700. Please check that for me, if that's correct. You need to leave undamaged and untraumatized herds. Just like in science, you need to have a placebo pill. Just like in the small program where you're monitoring the PZP mares, you have control mares just to see if the PZP is working. You need to have control herds in the wild that are undamaged and untouched, because if you don't, you have no idea if the PZP is working, if sex ratio skewing is working. Horses that have been rounded up.
1 minute.
Horses that have been rounded up will never recover from the physical and mental trauma that you have inflicted on them. They will never be the same. And 20 years from now, we want to have herds that we can scientifically study that have natural, untouched, raw herd dynamics. What we want for the horses is 2% of America. We have 695 million federal acres in America. Of that amount, you are managing 265 million acres of that. Of the acres that you're managing, cattle are allowed on 160 million acres of those. Our horses are only allowed on 26 million acres. That constitutes 4% of America. If you give them 50% of forage allocation, in those 26 million acres, that will constitute 2% of America. We're asking you for 2% of America for our American icons. Is that really too much to ask?
Next up is Jennifer Gillespie, and then after that, Marjorie Farah. And I would like to remind us of the respect ground rule. We need to be able to appreciate that we're all individuals and institutions trying to address a commonly deeply cared for item, so please do so in a manner that we can hear you.
All right. Good morning. I'm Jennifer Gillespie. To Executive Director Robin Lonis and the members of the Advisory Board, I say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a new day and a new opportunity to make improvements for our wild horses and burros. BLM Director Bob Abbey's February 24th statement announced that he and the Bureau would be seeking new avenues to work with private organizations and individuals in order to improve the procedures of the roundups. Based on that implied invitation, I am offering some suggestions. I am one person, an individual, a taxpayer, who over the past 7 months has learned that there are gigantic problems and very intense, diverse opinions and judgments about the program of rounding up our nation's Mustangs and burros. For the purpose of today's agenda and the brief time to speak, my comments and suggestions are deliberately short and to the point. The leaders of the Bureau of Land Management and the citizen groups representing the welfare and the concerted efforts to keep our equines free roaming often find themselves in opposing camps. A high level of disagreement and genuine distrust seems evident, and sadly, the state of distrust is detrimental and counterproductive. Ironically, the two camps share the same attitude. Sadly, it is an attitude of distrust and lack of confidence. When policies and legally required procedures of operation are not transparent, the momentum of distrust continues to gain speed. Opinions may vary, but numbers should always be objective, unbiased, and consistently measurable. I am suggesting a new method of establishing transparency. Each and every payment made to the helicopter contractors should be posted online at the BLM website. The statement should indicate precisely how many animals are captured and at what rate. For example, if the contractor submits a request for payment for 200 horses at the rate of $350 per unit, the payment should reflect $70,000. That information becomes publicly known, and thus it creates transparency. Now, take that same public declaration of payment. This time, use the actual number of the animals gathered, and at this point, all payments to the helicopter contractors should indicate a total number of equines, which should become the official number of animals that are counted in a gather or roundup. Over a 1-year period of time, the members of the concerned citizens and those who are accounting for BLM should be able to arrive at the same identical number.
One minute.
Okay, wouldn't that be a novel approach to math? I, as one person, sometimes who is not schooled in the ways of BLM math, also have a second suggestion. In order to streamline the counting, I believe the horses and burros should have a tiny microchip implanted on their bodies, something similar to what we do for our beloved house pets like cats and dogs. The efficiency program can work. It can be monitored. We have wonderful systems already established by veterinarians. Even our wonderful large-scale grocery chains in America have inventory according to computer. These suggestions are simple, but I believe they are possible. They can prove to be a win-win situation, both for the BLM employees who are required to count for everything, and also for the concerned citizens who have previously not trusted the reports of the BLM. It is a beginning to a new transparency, a new level of trust, and a new chance for change through cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Marjorie Farah. Farabee, thank you. And then after her, Quaff McDonald. I'm not sure I got the first name properly. From Las Vegas.
Holders of the People's Trust, greetings. The love felt for our wild ones goes deeply into all forms of our feelings of national well-being. Every step we took towards progress was made possible by our steadfast horses, mules, and burros. Our great nation owes an enormous debt to these noble, wise, and underappreciated locomotives to our success. Wild horses, burros, and zebras originated in North America, and it is time your agency recognize and embrace the overwhelming science which proves this fact. Your mandate is to protect our national treasures. Wild burros, there are solutions, and many have been presented to you. For starters, we should put the welfare of the burros and wild horses in the hands of individuals who are not forced into a conflict of interest. The special interest of water-glutting mining, well-connected hunters, cattle, and self-serving alternative energy developers are there to make a profit or obtain a trophy, not to protect the wild burros and mustangs. It is for these reasons that it is obvious that the welfare of the wild ones should be in the hands of persons who do not have to answer to any of these groups. It should be a board that is exclusively and energetically addressing the needs of these magnificent animals who make our collective lives so enriched just because they're there. When one speaks of solutions, it's clear that we are speaking about communities and not just the wild ones who live close by. Entire industries can be set up to sustain the herds using the reserve design strategy proposed by Craig Downer, a well-respected wildlife biologist. We can move toward a solution that is both rewarding to the communities that have the good fortune to have these treasures at their back door and sustaining to the herds themselves. Mustang makeover competitions hosted by proven natural horsemanship trainers can then be held in these regions. The trained animals that result can then be used for respectful, educational tours about the region and the glorious wildlife that resides there. Packing tours on horses and mules with a train of packing burros, let's not forget the burros, would be a wholesome family fun and ideal for teaching about American history, civics, nature, ecology, geology, archaeology, and astronomy. Do not forget that the lands which were set aside for the primary use of the wild burro and horse use the word primarily. To date, your agency has egregiously ignored the significant wording of the Free Roaming Wild Horse and Burro Act in favor of destructive cattle. Livestock grazing on the lands designated primarily for the use of the wild burro and horse outnumbers the wild ones 50 to 1, and in some areas, much, much more. While your agency touts that the wild burros and horses are damaging to the land, quite clearly the opposite is true. Overgrazing by cattle is the culprit. Because wild burros and horses are not ruminants, and because they travel great distances every day, they add to the ecosystems in which they live. As they graze and eliminate what they graze, they are reseeding and rebuilding the soil. This life-giving function acts to give moisture to the soil and house seeds as they germinate.
Less than 1 minute.
Because wild burros and horses instinctively understand that hanging around a watering hole will make them vulnerable to predators, they drink and move on. I would argue, and science will back me, that the niche they fill in the ecosystem is crucial to the health of these often rugged terrains. This board must also return to the American people's wild herds the millions of acres taken and that rightfully belong to them for their primary use, and this board needs to establish community involvement in developing reserve design which incorporates all aspects of a healthy relationship with the returned wild ones. As always, the wild burros and horses have given their lives to provide us our present successes, and they will do so again. It is notable for us all that we stand for moral and ethical solutions honored by the American people. I thank you for hearing my concerns and ideas. I hope we are able to find a positive way forward now and in the future. As a grandmother, I dearly look forward to showing my grandchildren the splendor and excitement of seeing wild herds of burros living in their element. I look forward to showing them wild horses as they live and play in the ecosystems they help to sustain. I pray that this agency will consider my grandchildren as they make their decisions about the people's wild burros and horses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to remind you, right now you're providing your comments to the advisory board, and BLM is here to listen, and then the advisory board is going to take your input this afternoon to decide what recommendations they might want to put forward to BLM, just to clarify who you're speaking to. So now we have Ms.
Cindy
McDonald, and next up is Craig Downer.
Good morning, dear Chairman Robin Lowens and advisory committee members. Despite best made plans, it is with regret I cannot be with you today and have asked Cindy McDonald to make this presentation on behalf of our organization. It has been 7 years since I first brought the repatriation issue of the Coyote Canyon wild horse herd to your attention in Phoenix, Arizona, February 2004. On behalf of Coyote Canyon Caballos Dianza, a 501c3, I again request the board's recommendation to restore San Diego's tiny heritage herd in accordance and compliance with a multitude of laws to its 1971 historic migratory ranges on BLM's Beauty Mountain holdings. The Coyote Canyon wild horse herd represents the evolution of Spanish, Native American, and Western settlement in the San Diego Riverside County regions from 1772 through 2003. The Coyote Canyon herd is now languishing in captivity and extinct in the wild. Despite the partnership BLM, Tom Pagotnich offered our organization to restore, manage, and maintain this rare, distinct population of wild horses unique to the local landscape. The politically motivated and fatally flawed management plans that zeroed the Coyote Canyon wild horse herd must be amended to ensure the future of this local, culturally historic wildlife resource. Please note that Henry Bassan stated when he signed the South Coast RMP Record of Decision that any substantial change to the approved RMP ROD can only be made via a plan amendment process with public involvement in accordance with BLM regulations, 42 CFR 1610. Recently, BLM Tom Pagotnich concurred with this. On page 12, under Plan Monitoring and Implementation, note that BLM is to monitor the RMP on an annual basis and identify needed changes to the RMP to implement a formal plan amendment or revision. A resource management plan shall be revised as necessary based on monitoring and evaluation findings, new data, new or revised policy, and changes in circumstance affecting the entire plan or major portions of the plan. Revisions shall comply with all of the requirements of these regulations for preparing and approving an original resource management plan. Additional and voluminous documentation has surfaced, both oral and written, proving the herd migratory historic ranges were grossly under-inventoried. In addition, the management plans are inconsistent with county historic conservation and wildlife habitat management plans. Please recommend to BLM an RMP amendment to re-inventory and redesignate the herd area for repatriation of the Coyote Canyon wild horses. Thank you for your consideration. Kathleen Hayden, St. Isabel, California. I also have an attachment from Supervisor Bill Horn and his recommendation for the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Craig Downer, and then after Craig, hold on, it would be Cinnamon Gully.
Okay, I believe you have my statement that I gave to Ramona. Do you have that?
We will
I
get it.
mean,
Thank you.
that I gave her on the email. Y'all have
Is
that.
it in their books?
Okay, thank you.
It's in their books.
I'll just read some certain segments from my statement. Try and read it with expression. I'm faithful in that. It is high time for a serious reappraisal of values and priorities. And here the wild burros and horses enter with a major role to play. To begin, they should be officially recognized as returned natives and as restorers of the North American ecosystem. As post-gastric, as opposed to ruminant digesters, they are enormous potential for building nutrient-rich and moisture-retaining soils and of broadly dispersing germinative seeds of many native species should be recognized. Also recognized should be their major role in reducing dry, flammable vegetation and in preventing those catastrophic fires that are now on the upsurge due to the effects of global warming. They fill an empty niche that is complementary to the great majority of species in the North American ecosystems where they evolved. And this includes the equally deeply rooted pronghorn. And let us not forget that because they combine power and beauty in a remarkable way, these animals are inspirational. In the wild and through respectful and moderate visits, they uplift us from the doldrums of a civilization too exclusively fixated upon mankind and its creations, too artificial and out of tune with the greater world of nature. The wild horses and burros will show us a better way of life when we learn by observing them in the wild and on their own terms, not our imposed ones. But these wonderful animals who have done so much for us over the centuries will not be able to fulfill their role on Earth if humans continue to botch their relations with them. As the following facts prove, has been, but need not continue to be the case. The proportions of wild burros and horses in relation to livestock and big game on the public lands is grossly weighted in favor of the latter, especially livestock.
1 minute.
The 1971 Act authorized a small fraction, namely 1/6 of the public BLM and Forest Service lands for wild horses and burros. Here, in these relatively minor areas, these two splendid species are by law authorized to be the principal, though not exclusive, presences. Perversely, this core legal intent has been ignored by authorities, since rarely do wild equids receive even 1/4 of the available forage allocation within their legal areas.
10 seconds.
Okay. Well, thanks a million. All right.
Thank you. After Cinnamon Gully is Callie Hendrickson.
Thank you for your time today. I have a concern regarding appropriate management levels. This is a hotly debated statistic, let alone how the HMLs are determined. I'm not here today to discuss the pros and cons. I'm here to ask a very simple question and highlight a single item that I think drastically impacts the basis of AML determination. What if they are wrong about the AMLs and they're not accurate? What if calculations were done wrong? What if the formula that used has a flaw? Information posted at one time on the rate of population of horses rises 20% a year and doubles in 4 years if not properly managed. We all know that 20% times 4 is 80, not 100. I know that individuals who write, deliver, and update the web pages know this too, but are just using the information that are provided and rely on that information being correct, so it might be easy not to catch a mistake. Someone somewhere at one time made a mathematical mistake that went unnoticed. Mistakes are made all the time. That being the case, I want to bring attention another possible mistake, but this one has a huge part in the core calculations. I reviewed the environmental assessment for the Twin Peaks gather last year. I wanted to understand what justified such large numbers of wild horses and burros being captured and removed from what is supposed to be their home. In the EA, it is explained how the number of horses and burros that the herd management area can support is much lower than the estimated numbers can support. There is a footnote that explains the factors that are used to make this determination of the AML range. It says an animal unit month is defined as the amount of forage necessary for the sustenance of one cow, or if it's equivalent, for a period of 1 month. That's straight from the PDF file. I see that horse AUMs are calculated using one mature horse with foal as one animal unit equivalent for a 12-month grazing period. To me, this seems to mean one horse for 12-month grazing period is equivalent to 1 AUM. But when the AML for the horses is calculated, the AUM is factored the same as a cow. So the total AUMs for the year are divided by 12 months to arrive at a number of horses that can graze year-round each month. The total AMU divided by 12 equals the AML. This same calculation is used to determine the number of cattle that can graze on the range each month too. But cattle typically don't graze year-round, but only for a certain number of months, during the year. So the denominator 12 in the calculation is the number of those months. For example, the total AMU divided by 3, the number of months, cattle is on the land.
1 minute.
Thank you. The mistake is here. A horse AMU should be factored as being for a year, 12 months of grazing, not a single month. It's a simple mistake. It makes sense since it's all rather confusing, but using the correct AMU factor for a horse, the formula is simple. 1 cow AMU would allow for a horse to graze for 12 months, an entire year, so there's no need to reduce the AMU factor by 12. For horses, total AUM equals total AML of horses. For years, the AMLs have been divided 12 times lower. With the current BML estimates, there are roughly 28,000 horses and burros on range land. There should be 12 times 28,000, equaling 336,000 horses and burros. This revised correction calculation of the AML is 36,000 horses on rangelands. The mistake's been made. There's no need for the program in its current state to continue, costing more money and bringing more horses and putting them in short-term and long-term holding facilities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Callie Hendrickson is next, and after that, Michael McCauley. And I would like to remind folks in your comments that we're hoping you're going to provide feedback on the strategy document for the board to consider that this afternoon. So if you could focus your comments there, it would be great.
Thank you. And yes, our comments are focused on the strategy here. I'm coming to you speaking on behalf of conservation districts that represent the landowners within our districts in an area where there is a herd management area that has a maximum...
Please, no comments in the background.
Thank you. A maximum number of AML at 235, and within and around that herd management area, there is currently 645, so a pretty significant difference. When we get into the sustainable herds, we do support the goal of sustainable herds at AML for the healthy environment and animal in a thriving natural ecological balance with other multiple uses. We strongly support BLM maintaining the wild horse and burro population within those herd management areas. We support prioritizing gathers where overpopulation most threatens the land health. If the environment is the key criteria for the gathers, there should not be a need to gather horses based on animal health, because you take care of the range, you're taking care of animal health. We support considering adjustments to AML based on sound, scientific, peer-reviewed data only at the time the resource management plan comes up for renewal with NEPA guidelines, not spending funding to do another NEPA analysis in between those times. On the objective 2, we support wide range of fertility control and other population control measures. We support implementing the catch, treat, and release only if BLM financial commitment to treat those horses on an annual basis, and only in areas where horses can be treated on an annual basis, because it does appear that if they're not being, the studies that they're doing currently shows that if they're not being treated on an annual basis, you are not getting the results that you intended. So I think we either need to get a drug that lasts longer, or we need to be sure that you have the ability to administer it on an annual basis. We do support adjusting the sex ratios I keep seeing that it is 60-40. I would strongly suggest that we take a look at 70-30 if we want to be serious about reducing the number of horses. Within some of these studies, I do have some experience with contracts with federal government, and in those I've seen that there are deliverables, and I would ask that BLM be sure to follow up that the deliverables have been done by the individuals and the organizations that are doing the studies.
1 minute.
Thank you. We do support implementing actions to improve the wild horse and burro management. The environment is the greatest concern in our mind. Horses are the most destructive ungulate on the BLM due to their grazing habits.
Respect, please.
Due to their grazing habits and hoof structure, because a horse has teeth on the top and the bottom, they have the ability to bite grass off down at the ground level or below, and they have the hooves to be able to dig it out when feed gets shorter, therefore causing grass mortality and range mortality, which then what comes back is the weeds and the noxious weeds, which is a serious problem on our public lands.
10 seconds.
Thank you. We would ask that there is the opportunity to work with the livestock producers to change those as long as there is no fund. The horse permittee has the ability to pay for the fence upkeep, the management of the horses, the water upkeep, and so forth, the same as the livestock owners do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up is Michael McCauley, and after Michael is Yvette Mercado.
I want to thank the committee members for their time and their commitment to this. I'm going to be very brief. For this conversation to be successful and for us to accomplish something, three things must happen. A motion must be set aside. BLM needs to show some leadership, and agendas cannot be allowed to set the tone or the direction of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Yvette Mercado, and after Yvette is Pat Barbs.
I'd like to remind you all of the 12 steps that we have, just in case you didn't hear it earlier and didn't catch any of it. With or without money, stop all the roundups now. Give the horses and burros their original acres back. Increase the horse AMLs and decrease the cattle AMLs. Fire Sun J and the carters. Use the humane roundup methods. Start being transparent. Give us access to everything all the time. Start being accountable for horses and record data correctly. Leave untouched and undamaged herds. Start using acceptable scientific methods. Make the holding facilities more humane and give them shelter. Stop acting like you are the pest control for ranchers and mining industries. Start acting like you're an agency in charge of preserving and protecting the last of our remaining wild horses and burros. And stop disgracing America and stop all the roundups now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Pat Barbs, and then after Pat is Gary Moyer.
Thank you. Actually, Pat Barber.
Barber, sorry.
Sorry. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the board this morning. I'm a regional supervisor with the Game and Fish Department down in Yuma, Arizona. This is a part of the state that has been involved in wild burro issues and wildlife issues for a number of years, and we've been working on that for decades. And even though horses and burros are managed primarily by the BLM, management of non-endangered resident wildlife is the primary responsibility of the individual states. Therefore, ensuring appropriate management of horses and burros and their impacts on wildlife is also a state interest. And We agree that the current implementation of the Wild Horse and Burro Act is not sustainable. We offer the following issues and recommendations to the board as they draft their recommendations to the BLM. I contend that the Wild Horse and Burro Act was initiated when horses and burros were in danger of disappearing from the western landscape. The act has essentially done its job to ensure this doesn't happen. Wild horse and burro populations have grown substantially and are not in any danger of being eliminated. We're concerned that perhaps while well-intentioned, this strategy will end up going beyond ensuring the existence of healthy horse and burro populations and actually result in expanding the presence of horses and burros at a level that can be disastrous to wildlife habitats across the West. The board's recommendation should encourage the BLM to fix the existing problems with the program and not continue to expand the horse and burro populations. Under current protections provided by the Act, horse and burro populations have proven very prolific, and only very active management prevents overpopulation in many areas. Eliminating or reducing the application of effective management tools in favor of experimental approaches and postponing management actions pending additional scientific review of existing data dangerously disregards much of what we've learned over the decades. Such decisions will place native wildlife and habitats at risk. It's also been clearly demonstrated over time that unmanaged and mismanaged horse and burro populations can and do cause significant habitat damage that negatively impacts states' wildlife populations and the state's ability to fulfill their statutory responsibilities to manage wildlife. The Game and Fish Department in Arizona currently estimates that horse and burro populations already exceed AML on six of Arizona's 7 herd management areas by approximately 200 to 350%. Additionally, horses and burros continue to occupy herd areas outside of HMAs as well as areas that aren't included in any herd areas. Regular horse and burro population surveys, gathers, and other appropriate actions are necessary to minimize ongoing negative impacts to native wildlife populations and habitats and to maintain a thriving natural ecological balance. Additionally, the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, or FLPMA, is the BLM's organic act, and that should provide direction for how the agency implements the Wild Horse and Burro Act. Under FLPMA,
1 minute.
Okay. Under FLPMA, BLM is required to coordinate management actions with the state and ensure management plans do not conflict with state plans where applicable. By going through all this public process with the board and kind of narrowing the range of options prior to going through the coordination as dictated by FLPMA, I think really limits those options when you get to NEPA and consultation with the Endangered Species Act. So I guess in conclusion, the Arizona Game and Fish Department feels pretty strongly that horses and burros should be managed with the AML. We'll continue to work with BLM and others on all fronts to ensure that we maintain a thriving ecological balance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Moyer is next, and after him, Palomino Armstrong.
Hello, I'm Gary Moyer, and I'm here representing the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts. Our organization, as well as the National Association of Conservation Districts, has policy, and my comments are a reflection of what our policies are. I understand that our role today is to make suggestions to you as the board that you then will suggest to BLM and hope they follow. First, one of the things that we feel is lacking in the NEPA process on how the BLM goes about this whole wild horse issue is the NEPA process requires that the local customs and cultures be addressed, as well as the economic impact of the activities of the BLM. We would like to see a stronger emphasis put on that portion of the NEPA process. One other thing I'd like to mention there is I was at your meeting last year in Denver. At that point, I made a suggestion that in the future, if you want to get the true a true reflection of the public sentiment, you need to hold these meetings in the areas that are impacted by the wild horse herd management areas. Obviously, my suggestion wasn't followed. We're back in Phoenix this year, and I would like to offer that the White River Conservation District in Meeker, Colorado would be more than happy to host this meeting next year. That being said, I'd like to talk to you about this whole issue of PZP birth control. It looks to us as though it is a very high-risk strategy to go down the road of PZP. If there's no budgetary component to have the necessary follow-through with the continued treatment with PZP, you stand the risk of having a population explosion. So without a commitment in the future and the budgetary component necessary for that commitment, it is very risky to continue with the PZP birth control. The main point I want to make is that, and I suggest you recommend this to BLM, is that they are required to follow the law that was established in 1971 by the Wild Horse and Burro Act. They should not be allowed to pick and choose what portions of that law they implement. That law requires that when an excess determination is made on horse numbers, that those horses be removed immediately. That is not an option. The law requires that to happen. As a user of public lands, whether you're a livestock producer, a sportsman, whatever, if you don't comply with the law, you're prosecuted.
Less than 1 minute.
It is inappropriate for the BLM to not have to comply with the same standard they expect the other people who use that land to comply with. The other thing I'd like to have you recommend is, in the interest of transparency, part of that transparency needs to be the BLM needs to make the public recognize what their legal authorities are, and they are bound by the legal authority provided them by the Wild Horse and Burro Act of 1971. I think there's a clear misunderstanding in the public as to what authority BLM has. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up is Palomino Armstrong, and then is it Hal Robinson or Niall Robinson from Elko, Nevada? Sorry if I have the wrong name.
Good morning, and thank you for letting us have the time to speak. On September 2nd, I went to Litchfield Corrals to observe a roundup, and I missed it. Because of what followed, we ended up rescuing a foal that was, he pretty much died the next day. He had been there and he had been overlooked. The vet had made a comment the week prior that he was losing weight, so he was observed, and apparently other advocates were following his story. Because of this, I wrote submitted a proposal. It's called Public Affairs Operational Guidelines, Proposal for Cooperative Care of Orphan and At-Risk Foals. The key points are early detection, early intervention, and cooperative care. And I also feel that until we have an accurate count, we need the roundup stopped. And I understand that if the count is over, we need to manage them. I have no issue with that. But I have a huge issue with inhumane actions. And I know yesterday it was said that, oh, the care of the animals received is not inhumane. And when I was at Litchfield, there was 900 horses, and probably 899 looked fabulous, to be honest. Honey Bandit he was so starved. I didn't know at the time he couldn't lay down. He was standing, barely. He was covered in bites. He had about 100 bites and kicks from other horses trying to nurse because he was so starved. Over the course of the time, we had to sew his eye out because it was caving in. He was so starved. He couldn't, once we laid him down, he couldn't move for 3 weeks. I mean, he could not lift his head. He could not move his head. So we rotated him like a chicken on a barbecue, and then we put him in a sling. His body was eating itself. And when I took him to the vet to get a blood transfusion, I got a call from Litchfield, and they were screaming at me for taking him to the vet. Apparently, because he had had people following the story prior, it was this huge
publicity thing. And I kept his updates going, but I mean, they were just about what happened to him. And as far as I was concerned, I took this foal to take care of it. I have a full rescue. That's what I do. That was what my purpose was. And they were angry because of the publicity. And it turned out they didn't want to pay the vet bills. And I never asked them to pay vet bills. I had no intention of it. I took him and we raised money at the rescue. And it just turned into this huge, ugly public mess. And I offered BLM to, you know, take his story and let's make it a turning point. You know, let's say he got lost in the shuffle. Let's turn this around and say it won't happen again and work together. Well, that got shot down. It was said on the news that, you know, I was responsible for the vet bills, which enraged the public. And like I said, it wasn't an issue. But it's just an example of how it just turned to a toilet instead of working together. And my concern is for the foals. And I just think that we need to work together and have a system set up where if a foal goes down or is, you know, if the vet says, hey, he's losing weight, get him some care. There are people available. Thank you. But basically, I would like you guys to consider my proposal. It goes along with what you guys were talking about of increased, you know, care and transparency. And also, I really feel like the BLM should have shelter for the horses, because if you go to our houses, they require us to have shelter for the horses. So it seems like if they feel the need for us to have shelter, it's only right that they have shelter at the BLM facilities. So I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Hal or Niall? Sorry.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Dr. Niall Robinson, and I am the president of the nonprofit organization Wild Horse Official Aid. Our goal is to work with the local rangers, the BLM wild horse specialists, and the members of the Fish and Game who oversee the wildlife in these areas. We understand, and we've noticed throughout the years that because of various means, there are times when there is not enough water available for the horses and the wildlife because of droughts, because of fires, whatever. And what we're proposing and wanting to do is to make sure that these needs are met. And if anyone has ever had the opportunity to watch a horse die from not having water, they understand that that is probably very essential. It's kind of a terrible thing to see. What we'd like to do as we work with the BLM is to set up water tanks where the rangers or whoever has told us that the water is not available, and that we will haul the water in with water trucks. We also know that in the wilderness areas, we'll have a helicopter available, and we'll haul water into the wilderness areas where there are needs, such as in Needles last summer. We know that there's lots of springs and other existing water places that are, because of the overuse and the BLM not having enough people to manage those places, that need to be restored. And we'd like to be able to help and restore those places so that there is water available. We'd also like to install monitors on those water places so that, as you know, that you can see what's watering there. I'd also have a chip involved to know whether or not there enough water is being pumped, or is the spring is running enough water to feed everything that's watering there. The monitors also show whether it's horses, cows, deer, elk, whatever. We want to make sure that the water is good enough for all the animals to drink. Then we'll take samples to make sure that water that they have available meets the standards that we have from the University of Wyoming on the type of water they should have. We would like to
1 minute.
thank you. We'd like to also maybe construct some new waters in places where there is forage, where the competition between wildlife, cattle and horses would not be quite so much, and would be able to use current unused forage. I thank you for letting me speak to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to mention, next person is Jill Buckley, and then after Jill will be Rachel Ann Reeves. We're now moving on to people who don't have written comments but want to make oral comments.
Good morning, committee members and BLM staff. My name is Jill Buckley, and I am with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, better known as the ASPCA. And we are the oldest humane society in the United States, actually in North America, and most people, when they think of the ASPCA, think that we focus mostly on dogs and cats. But the truth of the matter is that our founder, Henry Berg, in 1866, was mostly concerned with the cruel treatment of horses, work horses in New York City. So a major focus of the ASPCA is equine protection. Recent videos that we've seen have shown that injuries, trauma, and death that are common results of these wild horse roundups are very disturbing. As wild horses are driven into holding pens, closely knit family bands are broken up. Foals may be separated from their mothers, trampled, or sometimes too exhausted to keep up with the herd. They're left behind to fend for themselves out on the range, while stallions, suddenly crammed into close quarters, will fight and seriously injure each other. We ask that the BLM allow the remaining horses be managed on the range, and that they only be removed to administer PZP and then be returned, and that no more horses be brought into short and long-term holding facilities where they languish, many in feedlots, without any shelter from the elements, at an exorbitant cost to the American taxpayer, and obviously leading to the eventual extinction of the wild horse. We also ask that any roundups that occur for PZP should be videotaped to ensure that the horses are treated humanely during and after gathers. Lastly, the ASPCA has specialized equine veterinarians and a large field and response team who have assisted in many large-scale equine neglect cases. The most recent one was about 2 months ago in Arkansas, where we were called in to assist in about, I think it was over 200 severely neglected horses. We are often called in, and we would offer our staff to the BLM at any time to assist in the humane treatment and care of the wild horses. And we would request that one of our equine, or several of our equine specialists, be utilized by the BLM as humane observers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is Rachel Ann Reeves, and after Rachel, it's Jason Fairneyho.
All right. I have been struggling for the past 2 weeks trying to see what I'm going to say to this board. Did I just say it? Oh. And for that past 2 weeks, all of my family, all of my friends have been telling me to speak from your heart. My past students would tell you that I don't really have a heart, so if you will humor me, I would like to go ahead and go some more with the numbers that we're talking about. Earlier this year, I went ahead and I made, like several others that I've heard, a basic spreadsheet, a basic study based off of the Bureau of Land Management's numbers separating by HMA. My goal with this was that I could have a very easily viewable list that I could use to take a look at the numbers and just make basic analysis. I wasn't even halfway through California before I started to notice a pattern that was emerging. And that pattern is this. 48% of all HMAs see a statistically impossible increase exactly 2 years after the last gather. When I say statistically impossible increase, I include any herd management area that sees an increase of 1 year ranging from 54% to 704%, with the 704% being, I believe it's Diamond South in Nevada. Now, to give an example, for people that aren't very number inclined, Maverick Medicine is a herd management area in Nevada. There's a planned gather if the BLM gets funding this year of about 1,000 horses. The last gather was in 2006. In 2007, we see a 78% decrease, so 3/4 of the horses were taken off the range. In 2008, the numbers are 228 estimated horses. In 2009, that estimation jumps to 675 horses. So to translate, the BLM, by their own numbers that they release to the public on a yearly basis, estimated a 196% increase from 2008 to 2009. Again, for those of you that are not big on math, that means that every single horse on the range, including the stallions, had to have given birth to twins. I tried to objectively take a look and see, are there reasons that this could be? There were some anomalies that were self-correcting, and I took them out. I tried to consider, were the gather numbers incorrect in the first place? Well, I would really hope not, because if you were gathering them 2 years ago, spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars, I would hope you would have at least a reasonable range of how many would be left. I tried to consider, is there any, mass migrations from HMA to HMA? That's not possible either. As an example, Fox Hog and High Rock in California border each other. The same year that Fox Hog sees an increase of 133%, High Rock sees an increase of 187%. So from where I'm standing, just looking at a very basic analysis of the numbers, things aren't adding up, things are not correct. So my recommendations are as follows. Director Abbey states that a moratorium is untenable. So acknowledging that presumably thousands of horses are going to spontaneously drop dead from starvation if they have to wait that 1 extra year for a gather, then I'm not going to ask for a moratorium. But I am going to stand before you and demand that you stop all roundups in these areas that I have found where the numbers are very clearly faulty. I am not saying that they have to be stopped permanently, but I am saying that you cannot continue to plan to remove horses where you have increases that are not physically possible. I am sick and tired of going through statistic after statistic of areas where the Bureau of Land Management conducts a roundup, during that roundup finds out there are half as many horses as they predicted, and then still proceeds to take 50 to 75% of them off that range
30
anyway.
seconds.
It just doesn't make sense. I would also like to recommend that the board consider more measures for quality control. Any business anywhere has an audit process, a fact-checking process. When these numbers happen, when we see these statistically impossible increases or anything of that nature, those need to be addressed, reviewed, and potentially corrected immediately, because those numbers are going unchecked for years and years and years, and it just keeps making a bigger and bigger mess that is harder to calculate.
Time
Thank
up.
you for your time.
Thank you. I think so. Let me, hold on. Okay. So next up is Jason Ferniho, and then we'll take a break.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I am Jason Ferniho. I'm the Director of Agriculture for the state of Wyoming. We will be providing written comments to the BLM on the proposed strategy, as well as my brief comments here this morning. Today I just want to remind folks that the BLM is a multi-use agency. And as such, the first charge of the BLM is management of the resource. Without proper management of the land resource, we all lose. In my groups, my organizations, we have to manage our lands and the federal lands as well for livestock. As we heard earlier today, we're managing for wildlife as well. The ultimate goal must be to protect the resource. You know, I'm encouraged this morning and as yesterday by some of the ideas that have come out from the proposed strategy, especially sustainable herds. I think that that is a very, very big concept and one that is necessary for us to look at. However, the goals and objectives to achieve those sustainable herds need to be in addition to current management, not in lieu of. What I heard yesterday that did discourage me is that summer gathers are off the table. This strategy, regardless of the reason, and the reason we were given was budgetary yesterday, is in direct violation of a consent decree and of a court order. So I am very concerned of where that goes. In addition to that, if what I heard yesterday is correct and the numbers that I heard yesterday are correct, it throws off BLM's numbers by a very significant amount in your proposed strategy. I think that that will have a very significant effect on what happens multiplied out over various years. The biggest flaw that I see in the proposed strategy are in the areas where you have no control over the outcome. Specifically, you have an area that talks about increasing adoptions and you're relying on that for a successful strategy. You haven't hit your adoption targets in at least 5 years, and now you're proposing to increase them. I think it's wonderful to have the effort to increase the adoptions. However, you have no control over how many horses will be adopted, so I think that is a very significant flaw. The other thing is increasing fertility control. I view this the same way. We can increase the efforts. We have not done this on a large scale. We don't know where it's going to go, so to rely on that for a successful strategy, I think, is flawed. I thank you for your time this morning, and I would just ask you that in your recommendations to the BLM, that you ask yourselves, does this proposed strategy help the management issues from a multi-use perspective, or does it harm it? Thank you very much for your time.